Okay, part three of this series. In part one, I went over, ordained spouses and, kingdom spouses and what that is. Part two, I started, talking about scripture, 1 Timothy 4 1 through 3. And then I, went to Matthew 19 10 through 12. And I kind of explained, went through, kind of explaining, a little bit, further on, just that, what First Timothy 4 1 through 3 is saying there, and things like that. So, um, here I'm picking up, and if you haven't watched part two, watch part two before you watch this. Um, So here in part three, I'm picking up in First Corinthians 7, 26 through 29. And I don't know if I'm going to read the all of it, but I'm going to read in 26. Actually, in 25, you know, Paul is saying that the that God is, in his mercy is, through wisdom, giving him the answer. And in the beginning of this chapter, Paul is saying, like, because there is so much sexual immorality, each man should have his own wife, and each woman should have her own husband. And then, down in um, verse 26, he picks up with this: because of the present crisis, I think it is best to remain as you are. 27. If you have a wife, do not seek to end marriage, and do not if you do not have a wife, do not seek to get married. 28. But if you do get married, it is not a sin. And if you are a young woman gets married, it is not a sin. So I'm gonna stop there. And basically, in one sense, Paul is, I do believe in one sense, Paul is circling back around to where he is talking about, because there is, so much, sexual sin, you should get married, but we shouldn't, we shouldn't, be searching for it. We shouldn't be looking for it. We shouldn't be, like eager to get married. We shouldn't have that, you know like basically what he's saying is you shouldn't get married based on, lustful thoughts and lustful thinking and things like that. Like, you should be patient and wait on the Lord. And I kind of talked about that already. um and then, in another sense, what Paul is also doing, in another sense, he is actually stating Matthew 19, uh, Matthew 19, and I already went 10 through 11, but Matthew 19, uh, at the end of 12, um, and some choose not to marry for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. So so basically, in one sense, that's also what Paul is, stating, that, you know, for the sake of the kingdom of heaven, you should, stay single if you're single. Like in one sense, you know, not, completely, because look what Jesus says after. He says, let anyone accept this who can. I do believe, and I'm not 100% sure, but I do believe that that Jesus, excuse my speech there, but Jesus is saying, like he's going back to verse 11, where he said, not everyone can accept this statement. He's saying, only those with the gift of singleness should accept, you know, being single for the sake of the kingdom, right? Because again, you know, he's saying for those with the gift of singleness. Now, in the part two, I explained how there really is no human being in this earth who would have the gift of singleness. So, going back to, um, I don't need a spouse, I got Jesus. You hear that a lot. So, in one sense, that is true, because for the sake of the kingdom, for the sake of God's kingdom, you should remain as you are. Um, right. Um, so in one sense, we find that that is true. But even Jesus says, let anyone accept this at, if they can. You know, basically applying, let anyone with the gift of singleness accept it. But again, I would say that, go back and watch part two, and you will see an explanation to why I do not believe there is such thing as a gift of singleness, at least not here on earth. But then also I will want to talk about this real fast, is we should not have idols. And if you are, you know, putting marriage before the Lord, if you are putting wanting to get married before the Lord, that's an idol. And you need to lay that idol down. So in a sense, I don't need a spouse would also be correct, because we should not have idols. We should be putting God first, right? We should be seeking first the kingdom. And so in one sense, we should not be needing a spouse, because Jesus should be enough. Going back to, we should not idolize marriage. And see, when you put that we should not have idols, well, then it all makes sense of what Paul is saying, and it all makes sense of what Jesus is saying. See, they're not saying no, we should not have idols.